Hey fellas, it's me, good old Tom again, and guess what? It's another video. So soon you ask? Well, there is one little caveat, I'll tell you. It's one of my shorter videos, kind of like Blasphemous that I did earlier this year, where it's only going to be around 10 minutes or so. But, that being said, the less that is said about this game, the better. And what we're going to take a look at is a game called The Horror of Salazar House by Maldo19.
The Enigma of Salazar House, or also known as The Horror of Salazar House, is developed by a man named Maldo19, or from now on known as Maldonado, published by Torture Star Video, which seems to be the publication arm of Puppet Combo and Friends, which are the fine proprietors of low-poly PlayStation 1 horror goodness. One of these days I'll have to make a full overview of the Puppet Combo games because they fit into this wonderful low-poly grindhouse/exploitation horror sort of niche that I genuinely cannot get enough of. So the more people that develop games this way, well, the better in my opinion. But anyway, Maldo19 is based out of, oh god. Blasphemous is developed by Spanish developers known as the Game Kitchen.
No,
oh no, I did it again, didn't I?
Yuppie Psycho by Baroque Decay, a studio based out of Spain.
So yeah, Maldo19 is based out of Chile, or Chile, and yeah, that works out. And he hails from the city of Santiago.
Okay, stop it. Okay, I can't take it anymore. I know it looks suspicious from your perspective because this is going to be my third game in a row that I talk that is from the Latin world. But you know what? I'm going to give you fellas a caveat. Next game, we're not going to be talking about anything that is any part of the word with the ñ. That's the Spanish N that goes we. Like that, you know what I'm saying? So, don't worry about it. It's going to be a much longer video. It ain't going to be anywhere from the Latin world. And for the people that are out there that are still going to give me crap, well, I got this nice spaghetti blaster here. And if you don't like it, I'm going to blast you. And you know what that means? You're going to turn into a gabagool just in time for Halloween.
Alrighty, now that I threatened my viewers with death, we can make an actual honest look at the game now. Maldonado lives in the fine city of Santiago in Chile, which is a setting where our game takes place in, specifically on the big old spooky mansion in an island of Chiloé. You play the role of one Elisa Munoz, who is tasked with getting to the scoop on what exactly happened in the Salazar house in 1986, when the famed author Jaime Salazar and his family abruptly went missing from their home and were never found. Without going into too much detail, what will transpire is a wonderful slow burn of horror story of lost loved ones, the perversion of the human body, and of course, as with any good horror of the setting period, dealing with the devil. Now, of course, I'm not going to spoil much because the first thing that you should know, fellas, is that the game, well, it's not very long at all. I've seemed to have grabbed everything that I really wanted to in around 2 hours or so, with a few more extras to collect, so I would say the game might run you about 3 hours.
Now forgive me that if we don't go too far into the details of this game, because really, I don't want to spoil a lot. So instead, we're going to take a look at a lot of the influences that I think that Maldonado had when making this game.
Now this is all basically guessing and pure projection, so if I'm completely off the ball, then I would like to apologize to Maldonado. But I feel that a lot of the influences and the style of the type of story come from good old exploitation films from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. For the uninitiated of watching nothing but some of the best and worst schlock out there, exploitation films were in essence a movement within filmmaking to find new trends and exploiting it to hell and back. A lot of the films that you might have watched or that know are classics are exploitation films and you might not have known. For example, within Exploitation Cinema, you have a plethora of subgenres ranging from spaghetti westerns, where the Italians captured the long-lost nostalgia for the Wild West and saturated the film market with wonderfully done films like Death Rides a Horse, Django, Day of Anger, and Compañeros, which would lead to Sergio Leone creating the Dollars trilogy and Once Upon a Time in the West. Another example I talk about are the blaxploitation films such as Black Belt Jones, Black Gestapo, and of course, Blackula. But we can never forget my favorites of the genre in Rudy Ray Moore's Dolomite trilogy, where he plays the titular Dolomite and does a bunch of wonderful stuff on screen.
Man, move over and let me pass. Before they have to be pulling these hush puppies out your motherfucking ass.
You might be trying to wonder, damn Tom, why are you talking about, black people doing kung fu and spaghetti westerns, but it's kind of a way to contextualize this entire exploitation film movement. And you know what? If you people want me to talk more about it, you know who I am. So, give me a shout, because I would love to talk about exploitation cinema, because I love it.
The two big genres that I want to talk about that I feel had the most influence in the story is a good old mixture of slasher horror movies and good old Italian giallo films. Honestly, I can label all of Torture Star Video's games as having been influenced by B-movie horror schlock from a bygone age, but for Salazar House in particular, I see a lot of influences from Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho and the original Friday the 13th, when it was Jason Voorhees' deranged mother going around doing some absolutely brutal stuff. And without spoiling it too much, you'll be chased around the house by a deranged woman and a chef's knife, like the slasher movies of old, in her bed to continue some dark ritual being done in the house. I also see a lot of Italian giallo influences with the nature of dark rituals taking place inside Salazar House, and a lot of the visuals I feel could be ripped out of films like Dario Argento's Suspiria, with a lot more of the gory stuff looking like it came from a Lucio Fulci film, like good old Zombie 2. And finally, I can also feel the dark cultish seeping in from films like All the Colors of the Dark, directed by Sergio Martino, with horrendous satanic rituals and bloody goopy stuff going on for personal gain.
Needless to say, fellas, one of these days I really should make a video on this sort of stuff, because this shish I love all damn year long. So, but needless to say, we should probably talk about the game again, and this time we're going to talk about its visual influences, and there's quite a few that I've spotted.
Immediately on looking upon this wonderful monstrosity, I get some wonderful Apple II vibes and a neat sort of Virtual Boy colorscape that, while simplistic, conveys everything it needs to without having to destroy my eyes, like an original Virtual Boy would. Though I will admit the colors aren't split into different channels to simulate the 3D effect. The game presents you with a selector on the side with directional controls so you can traverse a grid space that is the Salazar House. And to use any items or interact with the environment, you just click on the object on the right of the screen like you would in games like Ultima Underworld. Though the highlight in its visual aesthetic to me are the wonderfully rotoscoped scenes when some events happen that really add a layer of horror to the game. Not sure why, but I chalk it up to the uncanny nature of these wonderfully rotoscoped monstrosities. And if it seems relatively complex to the uninitiated, then don't worry fellas, because in the prequel to the main game it teaches you the mechanics of the game rather intuitively by having you cook up some eggs, and by that point, fellas, you're gonna be an expert on this game engine. But in reality, this is as far as technically as the game really goes, and that's just dandy to be honest. Not everything has to be these giant sprawling adventure games that take hours to complete, with absurd adventure game logic needed to complete the puzzles. Though if I had to have a genuine gripe, I would say that the entity chasing you around the house eventually gets too fast for you to evade, which means you're going to have to take some damage that you otherwise feel like you shouldn't have. But of course, save points are close enough together that it really doesn't feel like an issue.
And lastly, before we wrap this baby up, let's take a look at the soundtrack and some of the wonderful, cool, old influences that Maldonado has put into it.
The soundtrack is made up of rather simple sounds that can be found in the soundscape of old Ataris and Commodore computers, but with the complexity of modern technicalities to really give it some zest. From reading what Maldonado has written on his soundtrack, I was pleasantly surprised to hear that the soundtrack for the game was inspired by a violin sonata by Giuseppe Tartini, known popularly as the Devil's Trill Sonata. Legends say that the composer Tartini developed the sonata after having a weird dream in which he sold his soul to the devil in order to get what he wished, only for the devil to surpass him in mastery of the violin. The entire ordeal can be found within Jérôme Lalonde's book Voyage d'un Français en Italie, basically, a voyage of a Frenchman in Italy. And I quote, One night, in the year 1713, I dreamed I had made a pact with the devil for my soul. Everything went as I wished. My new servant anticipated my every desire. Among other things, I gave him my violin to see if he could play. How great was my astonishment on hearing a sonata so wonderful and so beautiful, played with such great art and intelligence as I have never seen conceived in my boldest flights of fantasy. I felt enraptured, transported, enchanted. My breath failed me, and I awoke. I immediately grasped my violin in order to retain, in part at least, the impression of my dream. In vain, the music which I at this time composed is indeed the best that I have ever wrote, and I still call it the Devil's Trill. But the difference between it and which so moved me and so great that I would have destroyed my instrument and have said farewell to music forever if it had ever been possible for me to live without the enjoyment it affords me." End quote. Listening to both, you can really feel the influence of that particular sonata in the soundtrack for Salazar House, and it fits with the story the game is trying to tell. I'll have a performance of the sonata and the proto soundtrack link in the description below so you guys can take a look if you want.
So fellas, we're here at the end of the video basically, and now we gotta give it a good old Tom rating, which I'm gonna give the Horror of Salazar House a good old 9 out of 10.
I'll be the first to admit that I wish my videos were longer, but when it comes to games, I actually wish at times that we could get smaller, bite-sized, enriched experiences instead of multi-hour long monstrosities filled with monotony. And the Horror of Salazar House fills that particular itch for me. It's a neat little game with a great aesthetic with wonderful horror influences that I can't wait to see what Maldonado does next. It's also a great first for Torture Star Video, and if this is the level of quality we can expect from their future titles, then damn boy, sign me up, because Salazar House was fantastic. Fellas, I implore you to go out ahead and pick up Salazar House if you can. It's only a few dollars, so it won't create a big hole in your pocket, and it'll leave you more satisfied than those 5 McDoubles you just ordered.
Well fellas, there we got it. We're at the end of another wonderful video. I gotta say, as usual, thanks for coming to the end of the video and reaching the end. I absolutely love it when you guys do it. I put a lot of time and effort into these videos, so I'm happy that you reached the end. Next video that we're gonna talk about is not in the Latin country, I promise for sure. It's not gonna have no crazy and Munoz and Salazar, or none of that. So what we're gonna be taking a look at, I think is gonna be really cool, so I hope you'll join me for that one. And what else do I gotta say? I gotta say, happy Halloween, fellas. I hope you love it, because this is Tomthechosen1, and I'll be in my secret lab developing Tomthechosen2. You guys have a good time.